Hello, everyone, and welcome to TMF Week 2022. Thank you so much for joining us on our first panel discussion. The future of TMF is now. My name is Bart Budin. I work on the commercialization team here at Monsham. I'm incredibly excited and honored to be part of today's session and to be your host. And before we begin, I'd like to double check that everyone can see the presentation and that you can all hear me okay. So please write yes in the live chat or give me a thumbs up to let me know that everything is working well. You can find the live chat button in the engagement section panel located on the right-hand side of your screen as well. Perfect. So a few housekeeping items today before the fun begins. We want to ensure that we're on the same page. So all the TMF week sessions will be recorded and made available at the end of each day. Same goes for the slide decks. Also, each attendee will receive an attendance certificate for the entire TMF week conference. So you can go and show that off on LinkedIn and other social media. And please feel free to use the Q&A session to submit questions at any time during this session. This is an interactive one, so get your questions in. Q&A session is also located in the engagement side panel on your right-hand side. And the Q&A session will take place at the end of the presentation. I'm not sure if Paul has any specific things he's going to be showing today, but feel free to also network after each session or visit the Monsham booth. And with that, I would like to quickly welcome Paul, Allison, Victoria, Brian, and Francisca. And now that we've gotten the rules out of the way, I would like to turn the mic over to the panel so that they can introduce themselves and get the session started.
Great, thanks, Bob. So I'm really excited to be here. This is the first panel session of the week, and we've got a really great panel from various different backgrounds, various different geographic locations. So it's going to be quite interesting. And we're going to be talking about what we think the future holds when it comes to eTMF. So interesting stuff. Before we get started, we're going to go around the table and just introduce ourselves so you know who we are. So I'll quickly start. So I'm Paul Fenton, CEO of Montrium. I've been involved in TMF for a very long time and really enjoy the community. It's a great community out there. I'm very much involved in the reference model as well. I'm on the steering committee and I head up the EMS standards group. So that's me, and I'm going to pass it on to the next person on my screen, which is Brian.
Hi everyone, Brian Souter. I am with Merck. I'm a senior director. I've been in clinical research for 25 years, 19 of which at Merck. Good part of my career was in country operations. I worked as a CRA for about 10 years, and I've been in the TMF space for about 12 years. And I am the TMF head at Merck. I'm the business process owner. I've had the fortune of going through and leading 2 different eTMF integrations, as well as multiple inspector-facing experiences during health authority inspections. So, yep, that's what 12 years in TMF will do to you.
Victoria, would you like to go next?
Sure. Victoria Sparacio. I am the Global Head of Clinical Document Governance and Management at Novartis. And I am having too much fun overseeing a team of passionate leaders driving a company-wide transformation in the most challenging and business-critical domain, which we are very well too familiar with. Prior to I've also been in the document management space for a long time and in the TMF space as well. Prior to that, I had clinical development, clinical operations roles in different pharma companies and also CRO. I'm a molecular biologist by training, so that's sort of my background. In my sort of free time, I enjoy cooking, photography, hikes in nature, traveling and art, and more things. Too much fun. So that's me.
Right. Thanks. Francisca, would you like to go next?
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me also here as part of the panel. Yeah, very long background in eTMF as well. Been in the business for 25 years. Started in pharma before there was an E, before the TMF. Really working with paper eTMF back then, or TMFs. Have been in pharma, have been working for different TMF vendors, and now working on the services side. So I am the global head of clinical for NNIT. And still very much interested in the eTMF and support our customers on their various journeys on the TriMaster file as well. So very happy to be here.
Great. And last but not least, Alison. You're on mute, Alison.
Hi, thank you. I'm glad to be here today and off of mute. So I'm Alison Varjabandi. I'm a director of the TMF Management Office at Astellas. And so I head up the TMF standards group function for globally for the company. And I've been in the industry for about 24 years or so, and started off though in clinical research at a CRO about half my time. And so I've been in the TMF space for about the last 8 years. And I sit on the TMF reference model steering committee, and I'm also the business process owner for our eTMF solution at Astellas.
Great, and thanks, Alison, and thanks to everybody for making the time to be with us today. So as we were preparing this this panel discussion, we were thinking about what are the main things that we're hearing in conferences. You know, what are we talking about nowadays when we're talking about the future? And so we have some different themes that we're going to be discussing. The first theme that we're going to talk about is artificial intelligence, so AI, and then machine learning, because it seems that everybody's talking about that right now. It's kind of a big deal. So I want to sort of put to the panel the first question, and that is, are you actually using AI today in your environment? And if so, have you seen improvements with the use of AI in terms of quality and efficiency? So I'm going to put it out there. Anybody who wants to answer can answer. Go for it.
Paul, I can start.
Sure.
So we are using AI, mostly robotic process automation, but we have integrated or starting to look at natural language processing to help with more structured forms.
Yeah.
Our robots are fairly new. In essence, it is the mechanics of moving content from one system to another system. So what we try to do within our core eTMF system is house as much as we can without having to rely on other systems of record. So we've utilized bot technology to tie those two systems together and minimize the human aspect of moving those documents. We have played around, as I said, with natural language processing, primarily with 1572's financial disclosures, very structured forms, with great success. I feel like we'll be exploring more and more AI. I think it's only inevitable, but we've had very, very good success. We've had great success from the technology that we've homegrown within our IT space, as well as utilizing kind of off-the-shelf technology from our eTMF partner. So we're all in. It worked.
Great.
It works well.
That's good to hear. How about anyone else? Anyone else have any experience with AI? Any challenges as well, Victoria?
I'll go. So similar to Brian, I have in the previous company, we used it mainly as robotics process automation to transfer content, into the TMF quickly. I've used it very successfully for email management, because that is obviously a huge, when it comes to volumes, it's a large part of the TMF. It turns out to be email. And so that was actually a way to reduce the load from the study teams. Currently, we also tried with metrics as a support to give heads up to people. Some time milestone was coming up, so then the completeness wasn't up to scratch. So and so alert notifications and then escalation emails. That did not go down as well because obviously nobody likes to be dinged, and so we had to dial it back. So these were sort of two use cases. And then the third use case that is currently we are really limited in the use of the artificial intelligence, but it is we are exploring its use in terms of document classification and data preparation ahead of migrations to identify and sort of fill the gap for very unstructured data or very unstructured documents in very unstructured databases, essentially that have to migrate into a very structured TMF. And so we have to extrapolate from the content of the document because of large volumes instead of asking people to fill the gaps. So we are exploring that. The challenges are it's very unstructured data. And so the time it takes to build that learning and not having the right examples, the volume of data you need to train the AI, these are challenges that we're seeing. It's certainly in the short term, we don't have much use in Novartis at this time, but it is definitely our vision to develop that very much more and use it for predictive analytics, content recognition, better metadata capture, metrics and timeliness assessment, but also to help navigate through the content and build the story of the trial. I know you and I had talked years ago. It's something that it's really, really, close to my heart. I'd like to see us using it more and developing something that extrapolates from the transactions, from the content, and pulls out the information in a way that can be relayed. And that's a dream.
And that's where I think we were talking about this this document identification, which is the classic use case, right? Everyone's doing that more or less, in different scenarios, but that's kind of the big focus. But I also think that the extraction of more metadata, because all of a sudden we can extract a lot more information from the documents, is the key, because that will allow us not only to tell a better story without having to open a whole bunch of documents, which is kind of
exactly
right. But also, I think it has a lot of potential for things like automated quality checks and working out, okay, does this make sense? And cross checks and all of those things. And to do that, obviously, we need the metadata. We need the information in a structured format. And I think that's really the end game, is getting to that point where we can really start to have something that's very comprehensive. Any thoughts, guys? Francisca, Alison, have you guys got experience in AI, or any thoughts in terms of where you think it's going?
Yeah, maybe similar as well to what Vittoria just mentioned there. It is really about the automating the classification, because that is the one that typically burdens our organizations the most. And then, of course, also the standardization, being able to look at that as a way to enable data enhancements, especially if you have various different sources, various different partners where you're looking to get that intake of content from these different sources, that you have that need for standardization that's typically disrupted when we're working in very complex partner landscape as well. So, but I just want to pick up on what you said before in terms of the metadata, because I think that's actually part, not just the automation, but the part that really is enabled by AI is the fact that you can extract so much information from this data and what we want to do with it, not just in the, how to say it, normal terms of completeness and regular quality, but really truly start looking at it in active, inspection readiness. Trying to really automate that part of it as well is very, very interesting, and something a lot of a lot of people we talk to also look as the ultimate goal, even though it's a little bit further out in the future. It's a very interesting what we're already able to do now.
We've been working on algorithms to do that, to extract metadata and as much as we possibly can, and it works really well. But you also have to be careful, because more data means more data management. So you have to really you have to have the resources to manage it as well, and also you have to be really comfortable and with the confidence levels and all of those things, because data can be good, but it can also be bad because it could mislead people, and so it's really a toss up. Alison, I'm really interested in your thoughts before we move on to the next subject.
Yeah, sure. So we're using AI for auto classification, and we really like it. Feel that it's more accurate, obviously, than manual selection by the end users.
Yeah.
But there are a couple of challenges that we've run into, because we're sort of still in the infancy of AI within our organization. And so we're really looking at it closely. And two main things have been risks or challenges for us. And that includes the training of the machine, which I'm hearing everyone sort of talk about that. And we use sort of an out of box by the eTMF vendor provided type of training. And we're learning that, sometimes we don't have enough of that document type in order for it to train. And so maybe more of in the future for us could be a more customized, where we train it ourselves where we can hand pick the documents that we want to train on certain classifications. And maybe we focus on, our higher risk classification items, because we do have risk levels identified. The second challenge we've dealt with is end users sort of uptaking this new approach to how they have to submit their records in order for the auto classification to work appropriately. And so what we're doing is looking at reports. Whenever we'd like, we can go in and look at reports. We can see how the records were uploaded, if the auto classification occurred or not. And based off of that information, we can go back to the CRO or to the sponsor function and say, hey, we can see last month that you uploaded 3,000 records, but you did it an old way. You need to do it this way. And then it's going to help you, because then it's going to auto classify a lot of those records. So that's something that we've noticed.
Yeah, change management is always a challenge, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's great. Well, that was really interesting, and I could talk about it all day. Yes, Brian.
Sorry to interrupt. So I went on about how wonderful it is, but I didn't mention any challenges. We do have challenges as well. I just didn't want to be the first to admit. Right. I think one of the bigger challenges that hasn't already been stated is to build or to not build. So we have constructed our own bots, locally, and we are utilizing a classification bot from our eTMF vendor as well. We know that there's more that can be done, but it is trying to proceed wisely, like financially, to build or to wait. And so that's been one of the big challenges that we've experienced as well.
Yeah. No, I agree. And actually, so one thing that Alison said, which is kind of linked to what you're saying, Brian, is that they didn't have enough data, so documents, to adequately train the AI for documents that are rarer. So obviously things that we see all the time, the site documents, that always works. But then there are documents which aren't that frequent in a study. And so to truly train the algorithm, you need to have quite a few of them. And so there is a case where vendors could potentially play a role where, in a very sort of confidential, anonymous manner, they're able to train the algorithm across sponsors. So there's no data being leaked or anything like that. And in fact, when you train an algorithm, it uses the data, but it doesn't store it. And so there's no kind of mixing of information, if you like, either. But that could be a way of actually getting a much more performant algorithm. And I know that within our organization, we actually reached out to a lot of our different clients and said, hey guys, we want to do this in two different ways. It's either just on your data or it's across multiple sponsors. Do you opt in? Do you agree? Because obviously we have to get their agreement. And the ones that did, obviously the results are much, much better, because we've got a much larger volume of data. So it's something to think about and maybe talk to your vendor about as well. So yeah, okay, great. We're gonna have to move on because we've only got 40 minutes left and I've still got lots of questions for you guys. So let's move on to remote inspections. Obviously with COVID, everything changed and all of a sudden we're starting to experience this new, well, it wasn't completely new because some of the regulatory authorities were doing remote inspections prior to COVID, but once COVID hit, we really started to get primarily remote inspections. And so I wanted to ask you about your experiences with remote inspections, and how did the technology support you? And then what did you not have within your system or within your technology base, which you really could have done with to make it easier? So who wants to start on that?
I can go. I beat you to it. So yes, we had a remote inspection in 2020, and one of the key difference, well, probably the main difference, was a bit of a surprise even, was the duration of the inspection, and that was over the span of 6 months. So that's quite a long time. But it wasn't all the time. It was on and off, but we had to maintain access to the TMF, to the eTMF, throughout the time frame, because they were going back and then nothing, and then they were going back and looking at some more, and they were, so that was quite a significant difference. We weren't really prepared for that to be the case. Do I think that this will become the norm? Well, I hope not for 6 months, but yes, I think so. I think very much so. The regulators are, like every one of us, we've learned through the pandemic that the virtual setup, it's an effective surrogate of a face-to-face experience. So I think when it comes to financial resources, consideration, travel for inspectors, having the right number of inspectors available, etc., these will all kind of come into play, and we'll learn probably some in a mixed model, but I do think we'll see more and more of this. This is going to happen. That's my thinking. And where I think we could improve is by proactively, almost like treating the inspection to like one of these events, like this week, the TMF week, and treat it as that kind of experience in terms of how we handle it. And there are going to be some differences due to the nature of the experience, but I see that this is kind of probably the future. Having an event inspection, you have different chats, the private chat, the public chat, the content there that can be shared, the visual, camera, and all that kind of experience. That's
and having that integrated into your eTMF environment.
Having that integrated in, yes. Exactly.
Yeah. That's interesting. Thanks.
My 2 cents, but let's see.
Something that must have kept
in 3 years' time. In 3 years' time, we'll be back here and say,
You remember those on-site inspections? But the 6 months, that must have made people very nervous, right? Just having to sort of maintain.
September to February.
Yeah. And did they tell you when they were going to go back in, or it was just they just did what they wanted?
No, they just had some sort of debriefs, and then they said, "Oh, we're gonna need the access for another 30 days, and then actually we need to go back, and we're not gonna look at it now because we have other things to do, but we need access for another month." And so it kind of dragged. It wasn't planned to be that way from the beginning.
Yeah.
So,
wow. That's
like,
interesting.
okay.
And that was an EU inspector.
It was MHRA.
See, I'm not surprised that you say that. I'm not surprised. Interesting. Brian, you had something you wanted to say too.
Yeah, very similar experiences, Victoria. What I would say, my biggest kind of takeaway in terms of the differences was the engagement from the inspectors to the SMEs or the clinical team or the process owners. It was minimal at best. We provided our SOPs and maybe a brief introduction to kind of establish point of contact for questions or concerns. But there wasn't the long, arduous debriefings or interviews. It was just, here's our process, documentation, they would review it, and then comment on whether there was process deficiencies or not. So that was kind of the lack of engagement was my takeaway from it. Same agency, had elongated access, much longer than normal. We were informed to be accessing the system, and they stuck to it, so that was interesting. But a lot of what we do during the inspection, whether it's on-site or not, is daily reviews, audit trail reviews, who logged in, where are they looking, what did they see. So having that elongated access, not that it presented itself to be more of a difficult activity, but it was the anxiety of having it open and to continually to look day after day when they weren't accessing the system. They actually were not doing anything within the system on the days that they said that they weren't, but you still kind of have to check to see.
Oh, yeah.
So it was effort. It was effort that went into it. I do agree. I think that this is something in the future that's going to be part of our future. Sorry, Paul.
And I think, I mean, I suppose the anxiety also comes from the fact that the TMF is still very much a living thing. As they have access, you're still adding content. You still have to QC stuff, and I suppose the concern is that they get to see things that they that are maybe not quite ready for them to see yet. So it's a tough one. Yeah. How about Francisca and Alison? Any experiences on your end or any thoughts?
Not such from my end, to be honest. I think it's still something that's quite new, and a lot of people are now gaining the experience in the last couple of years, but still not as much from my end.
So I have to say we had 3 back-to-back remote inspections. And so we got the fire drill experience. Right. So a couple things that we learned is, our normal access for end users, they need an Active Directory account set up initially. And so we had to kind of prepare for inspector accounts a little differently so that we can just sort of give them at a moment's notice, like real-time access. So we made arrangements for that ahead of time. The other thing that we noticed is these inspectors are getting savvy with the eTMF, and they understand TMF reference model. They know their way around these systems. So the training, short, sweet, that's great because they're pretty comfortable with it. Some even, I believe, said, we don't need to take the training. We said, well, here's the slides for you anyways. And we provided like a quick look, one sheet on how to log in, how to navigate, how to search, that kind of thing. But it was important that we had an SME that really knew the system well, because there were times where they had to jump in and navigate around for the inspectors. And one thing to keep in mind is the inspectors may have a different view than an SME. So if the SME is showing their desktop, the inspector might be like, well, I don't see that. Can I have that same access? Yeah. So just to be aware of that is something. We noticed I think the document request went a little easier because, you're working in an eTMF. It felt like it was a little easier to get those document requests processed through. And I think the future, I agree with everyone that the future, I think that we're going to see more of these. It's possible, I guess, that maybe for GCP type inspections, that's where we'll see it more often. And maybe for 4CAUSE or something like that, maybe they'll still want to come face-to-face to put a little more emphasis or importance on that inspection.
I have one quick question for everyone before we move on to our next subject. So what do you actually show, or what do you allow the inspectors to access? Is it only final records that have already gone through QC and everything else? Or do you also provide them with access to draft documents or things that are still in the works?
We only allow final records, final state records. And actually, there's a couple tabs of our eTMF. There's a reports tab. And unless we give them access to a specific report, they don't see that tab within that. They can still create reports out of other mechanisms through the system. But they can't go to the reports and dashboards unless we give them access. Same thing with job aids and all of our announcements and stuff. That tab, I think we have hidden from them. So, yeah.
So pretty restricted. Anyone give access to draft documents?
I think I work with some organizations where you give access to the draft documents where you have review processes that are well documented and as part of your due diligence. And in those cases, you want to demonstrate that you're actually following your process, and that those instances you do give them access to the draft so they can see the results of it.
Yeah, no, I've seen that too. Makes sense. Great. Let's move on because we're already at 1:30. This is great discussion. Next thing I want to talk about is data-driven eTMF. So it's another thing that we're starting to hear about, data-driven. And data-driven TMF, if you think about it, it's obviously what we were talking about at the beginning of our discussion. Being able to extract data either from the documents or just collecting data upfront. If you think about the TMF, it's kind of I suppose it's a combination of emails and then a whole bunch of forms and then documents. So those forms, I think, could potentially be converted into more, sort of data collection tools. That's one example. And then, of course, with AI, extracting a lot more metadata will give us a much more, richer environment. One thing I wanted to ask you guys is, do you feel that if we took a more process-driven approach where we're actually organizing things by process rather than organizing things by process zones, sections, artifacts, that it would make it easier to manage the TMF and, more importantly, tell the story? Have any of you guys started to do that or not?
No, we haven't started to do that, but I think it is exactly like you're saying. The process is actually the backbone, not just for people knowing what and how to execute when, but also how the data is then structured, collected in a ways that make the storytelling easier. And so it would be, again, I think we moved. There's a mindset shift for everybody who's been in the industry for at least 15 years that is used to paper TMF. That's a data classification, it's a taxonomy point of view, moving away from that into more of a data flow and transaction and all that content. I think that's quite a mindset shift, and it's difficult to do that. We are used to think of a document as a document. So that's right. But I don't think there's any other way forward with the volume of data that now make in documents and make part of a trial, the complexity, the volumes, such a large collation that we have to change the way we see it. Yeah. Have we started? No. Can we start? Yes.
I don't think you are alone. I think we're sort of at the beginning of this thought process. I think there's potential to work as an industry to develop these kinds of things, so process models. And I know it's something that we've seen brought up. There's a big long list within the reference model of things people want us to work on, and this is one of them. Is defining that sort of model. And also defining relationships between pieces of information, so clustering and all of that kind of stuff. But has anyone sort of done anything remotely like that? So clustering of documents or packages, I suppose packages, maybe? Do you do document packages?
I mean, there are certain capabilities in terms of AI and certain methodologies that where you can use that where you truly do not know what kind of content you're getting, and it helps you get that immediate overview of the different types of clusters, if you can call it that, the different type of documents and data that's coming in that can help you with the preliminary classification. But beyond that, it's typically not as used yet, at least. But I think the data, the processes are interesting when we look at it specifically from an inspection readiness. That data causality, the dependencies between it, reflected in the individual study designs, the individual study approach. That's really where we want to go in the long run. Where we still need with Victoria's, how to say it, the way we view the eTMF or from the classical inspection readiness, completeness and so forth, we still need that old school way of kind of looking at it with the zone sections and artifacts. But I think the process is it's simply necessary if you want to get that automated inspection readiness to get the dependencies in that as well.
And even from a, I mean, I think it also makes the TMF so much more valuable because you can also start evaluating processes and seeing the deficiencies as well in the processes. Anyone else want to comment on the process model, process-based?
Just a follow-up comment on what you just said. I think it's everybody's experience is that when you start introducing an eTMF, it starts showing and magnifying and putting the spotlight on other processes. It's not the TMF, it's monitoring, it's oversight, it's whatever.
Exactly.
So that is back to what you were just saying, and Francisca, that's the shift. That's where it becomes useful, because that's not a record post hoc. It's you do it up front, you actually plan for that to be the case, and then you do. It's a risk management tool.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's also it'll enable us to better track what's going on as well. And I think that eventually, if you think about the fact that we can expose so much more information because we're able to extract metadata using AI, and if we can then model that information and organize it by process, then all of a sudden the system should be able to start producing like trackers and things like that we typically see in CTMS. And so all of a sudden we start to see CTMS emerging from TMF because it's no longer just a repository, it's a management system, it's a process management system. So that I think it's quite far out, but that's the way we're going, I think. And that's what's really exciting about it, because all of a sudden we're finally exploiting all of that information that we hold in those documents and actually making it much more actionable. So I'm going to move on because I want to ask you guys about other systems. So obviously the TMF traditionally is the document management system, but there are other systems that are TMF relevant. So things like EDC, ILT, pharmacovigilance, CTMS. I want to ask you guys how do you manage that today during inspections and also for things like completeness? So are you sort of using placeholders, signposts, those kinds of things? And then how do you see that in the future? Do you think it would make more sense to have a decentralized approach where you still maintain the source data in all of those systems and you just point to them? Or if there's kind of a centralized approach where we actually start to transfer data from those systems into one central TMF?
Yeah, Paul, I'd say for us, what we're doing now is somewhere in between. So for content that resides in other systems of record during the life of the study, we do use signpost until the end of the study. And then we have the data documentation, whatever it may be in those other systems. We have many different integrations where we'll pull them into our core eTMF system. We've been very fortunate. I'd say 99% of what would be a GCP inspectable TMF is in our core eTMF system at the end of the study. So we've worked very hard to kind of reduce the number of system of records once a study is closed for inspection purposes, just for all of the reasons that are known, direct access, control, archival, audit trail reviews, and the like. We feel that we have a fairly controlled process, and well-defined process for everything that I just stated within our core eTMF system, but it's very, very difficult to manage those aspects outside of systems that we do not own within the TMF space.
Right. No, exactly. No, it's a challenge. I mean, does everyone else do the same kind of thing? You're sort of using signposts and then creating
I think also here from a technology perspective, we look at AI. I mean, the need for centralization is centralizing all the content will most likely be less and less, because you are able to extract data and content from various systems, and having that turn into a story we can read that doesn't require any one system to directly access that. So I think perhaps in the future we're going to be more enabled to have a more flexible approach as well.
Right.
I agree. I think that's the beauty of the AI, that it kind of like a blanket can be overlaid across different systems, so I'm told, and that's where you can virtually see everything come together. Might be even from a change management, and much easier to manage, especially for large organizations that tend to have a plethora of existing systems in place. Yeah. That said, for that to work, I think there is a need to really deepen the understanding of the data flows, who is consumer, who inputs, etc. I don't think that there is that data governance. The data governance needs to become more prominent and probably even an industry standard level. I think that would be really helpful, because that will drive the capability in technology.
Yeah. I mean, there are definite things that are happening right now. So with like Trancelerate, Digital Data Flow Initiative, which is obviously being put in place by CDISC. The objective is that, right, is making sure that there's proper sort of integration and flow of data across systems. And the good news is obviously the reference model has now become part of CDISC, and so that that kind of opens the door of being part of that whole initiative. So I think that will definitely fuel a lot of these things in the future. It's 1:42 p.m. Eastern time. We've still got some questions, and the audience has also put a whole bunch of questions in the Q&A panel. So I just want to ask one or two more questions, and then we'll go to audience questions. So around audit trail and traceability. So this is kind of a big subject at the moment. The regulators are kind of really focusing a lot on this, and audit trail isn't what it used to be. So audit trail in the past, when you look at 21 CFR Part 11 or Annex 11 was creation, modification, deletion of records. But now the regulators are kind of expecting a lot more information around who did what, who reviewed what, who accessed what. There's a lot of things that they want to see. They want to see the full traceability of each record in the system. And then there's also another requirement to do periodic reviews of all of this information. And when I think about that, we're talking about significant amounts of data. If you're tracking every single thing that's happening in the system, it's significant amounts of data. So I want to ask you guys, how do you manage this periodic review of audit trail or activity log? How do you do that?
I can cover a few examples. I think what I see the most is really we're looking for trends, right? We're looking typically how people are using the systems, maybe to verify. Let's say you have a specific QC process, and you can use the audit trail to typically paint a picture of adherence to certain processes. Right. I think I see that the most, for example, also just in terms of user adoption. You have new features and functionality. Are they actually being used, and which roles are using them, and at what point during the process are they potentially using them? So it almost goes beyond just the regular inspection readiness. I know there are certain aspects of that, of course, in there as well, but really can use the audit trail for quite a few to verify our own processes and verify our adherence to those processes as well. That's right. What we typically see.
But the thing is obviously you have to have the tools to be able to manipulate and look at that data and analyze that data. And I think that's probably where a lot of people struggle. And also, what the guideline in the EMA it sort of says, well, you should be doing a periodic review of your audit trail, but it doesn't say what you're looking for. It doesn't tell you what you're actually meant to be looking for when you're doing that review. So, I mean, Victoria, do you guys do a periodic review?
Yeah, and I think that's a key point there, that you can't possibly review everything. And so you need to probably define in your procedure, what is it that you're asking different roles, a study lead, for example, to review, and that those things you can probably, you can make the ocean a little pond, and
Right.
also define procedurally that, once a year, every 6 months, whatever the frequency that suits the type of trial, the organization, etc., that can be that's suitable. Blinding, unblinding. So I've seen it very much. That's where you have a suspicion that somebody has accessed something they shouldn't be accessing. This is super useful. That's the case where you go and look at the audit trails, and you can actually demonstrate whether yes, there was a case of unblinding, but nobody's actually seen it yet. So therefore, they're still good. And so. Access rights, did the right people get the right access to the right document? And so those are the kind of, it's more of a keep an eye on who's accessing what. Does it not sign the right person? Then do an audit trail. You trigger an audit trail rule. So that's sort of how we have interpreted the, and then obviously you need to have suitable reports. You need to have suitable reports, which is one of the weak points, where if you really want to truly use it as a user, you want to be able to create your on-demand reports, not just a standard full trial audit trail report with certain fields and so on. So
yeah,
which don't have.
Alison, your experiences?
Yeah, I think I agree that our approach is the for cause, for sure. Just like Victoria was mentioning, when there's a question about unblinding or something like that, it's super useful. And so we have those types of cases where we'll dig into those audit trails. And then, as Francesca mentioned, just to verify our standards, our processes that people are following. So there's pretty routine. So you have your ad hoc for cause, and then we have these sort of routine checks that we do regularly, just to make sure that people are doing what they're supposed to be doing, and it's the right people that are doing those tasks.
Okay. I think there's also a case for using AI as well to do analysis of audit trails to find patterns or anomalies. It's possible.
I was going to say, but we had another case, I think was mentioned by Brian, checking what the inspectors have been reviewing during an inspection. You do often through the audit trail review, right? You're like, what did they actually go and see? And so that's not good. The AI, it kind of moves into a wish list kind of thing, but I've recently started to use this Office 365 VIVA tool, which is an AI built in that tells you how many emails you read, who are you connecting with, and also suggests, are you replying at the right time? Are you replying should you reply? It's been 3 days, whatever. That's the kind of thing the AI in an eTMF could do. Hey, so-and-so accessed the document, I don't see him in the study list. Is that right? You can be creative and come up with a lot of use cases where AI could be incredibly effective in the big data pool to do the work.
Oh, that's really interesting. I was reading. You get an email once a week, right? From
you get an email once a week or once a day. Yeah.
So he was saying you're in too many meetings. You need to take more time off.
Yeah, it says if you were actually multitasking during a meeting, you were sending other emails. It's linked with Teams and that kind of stuff. So you integrate it with an eTMF, and there's a lot that can happen. That kind of not just integrating it, but building with a similar approach, we can make the TMF much more lively.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I wanted to ask you guys about the new clinical trial regulation in Europe, and what impact you think that has on eTMF now and in the future.
Paul, just want to say first and foremost a little plug to your website. So you guys have provided a great deal of information and the white paper, a lot to the regulation that's coming. So big thanks to you for that. How that's going to shape our future, I don't know. I think what needs to be shaped or evolved is the reporting. Everything that Victoria had stated, we know that their information is there, and we can build certain code or criteria to identify risky behavior. So a document that's been downloaded excessively, or post-approval edits that have occurred to a document, or users outside of the study or a country accessing. So all of that information is available, but it's not reportable, not within our eTMF system. We do have part of our routine quality control activities where we provide guidance as in addition to looking at the technical QC of the document and the attributing and the metadata, also looking at the audit trail. But even with guidance, it becomes very difficult to identify when something is at risk for impacting data integrity or privacy or any sort of breach. And that becomes really tricky. And I think with the regulations that are coming now, it's going to put that much more pressure on us to be able to comply with those requirements.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Victoria, you're in Europe. What do you think?
On the clinical trial regulation, the EU, I think it will definitely require much more agility in terms of the shorter timelines to respond. There's now a new system that effectively is becoming an eTMF sort of appendix, not owned by the sponsor, owned by the regulator. There's it kind of hijacks a bit the classification. So I know we have had a bit of discussion in reference model meetings, where to file certain new artifacts or sub-artifacts that didn't exist. And so I think there are several challenges that it will raise, how operationally make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely.
We are still trying to figure it out.
It folds out, yeah. I'm very interested in the clinical trial information system. It's kind of, I mean, obviously it took them a long time to launch it, but it'll be interesting to see how that plus remote inspections maybe starts to connect together. All right, eTMF of the future. So what are the things? I'm actually just going to ask one question. Think about the system you have today. What's the thing that you would most like to see in that system in the future that you don't have at the moment? So what's the feature that you're missing that you would really like to see?
I would say at the moment, just the metadata extraction. We don't have that right now in our system, and that's going to be huge. That'll be a big game changer for us. So
more metadata.
Or extracting it through an AI, from the document.
Right.
Reducing that burden on the end users and the errors they make and the review QC that needs to be done on it and all that kind of stuff. So
yeah. Great. Anyone else?
But not so much. I mean, there's so much. I mean, almost like as long as it works, it's the answer there on the versus the current system. But just in it's that ability to tell the story of the trial in almost like in a time and events table. It goes back to the process, organizing, clustering, etc. But it's really that the time and events table. You can drill down if you want more detail, roll it up at the simplest possible level to tell the story of the trial. That's the kind of feature I'd like to see.
Yeah, better storytelling.
So I have a terrible analogy, but I see this as moving to some of the self-driving Tesla, right? So now it's become much easier today than several years ago to be able to recall documents, to retrieve. The search engines are good. We have, with all of the metadata that we used, it's highly reportable. There's a lot of typing and keying that is needed in order to recall documentation or records. So something that's more autonomous, just plugging in what you want and the system telling you exactly what it is that you have and displaying it. So whether it's voice automated or not, but just more evolution, simplification in the document retrieval. What we have is good now, so much better than what we've had in the past, but I see that getting easier.
Are you thinking, especially around sort of longer term archiving and stuff like that, being able to easily retrieve? Or even in sort of live TMFs?
I don't know. The requirements to retrieve archived records for inspectors or for legal purposes is somewhat few and far between. And I don't get involved with it a great deal. But what I can say, trying to find records for studies that were 20 plus years old is quite difficult. So I know all of the efforts that we're doing today will make life much easier for the next generation of TMFers. But it is amazing how much more controlled our environments are today, and I can only see that getting better as we move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Francisca, what about you? What's
I think I'm on Victoria's the story of the TMF. I really find that to be like the unicorn that we want to see. That automated inspection readiness, like true full inspection readiness with all the dependencies, being able to identify gaps during the course of the trial automatically, right? So we can close those in due time. I really see that as the potential future of the TMF with the technology that becomes available.
I agree. I think also it'd be nice if we could have like a kind of a health score, so you're either 100% health, which would never happen, or you've got a problem and you can see it very quickly, and you can see that at different levels as well. So that kind of feeds into the inspection readiness, and that's really based on things like your key metrics, your timeliness, your level of quality, outstanding queries, all of those different factors that all feed into quality and TMF health. So bringing that all together so that you have that one score and you can tell very quickly whether you've got a problem or not, and then you can drill into that problem. I think that's really interesting too.
Yeah, we're doing that right now, Paul. We're looking at an aggregate score that looks at a little bit of timeliness, a little bit of completeness and stuff. And who knows if it's going to be meaningful? Time will tell. We are starting to look at it because it is an interesting concept, just to look at one number and say, hey, it needs attention or it doesn't,
Right. No, absolutely. Guys, we've only got 3 minutes left, and I feel bad because I haven't asked any questions from the audience, but I'm just going to ask one. Do inspectors use Audit Trail as an inspection tool in your experience? Yes? Unanimous yes?
Oh, yeah.
All right, so that means I've got time for another question. So are you as sponsors still doing 100% QC of drafts before making final? Or are you taking?
I would say it's dependent upon the document or the record that's in question.
Okay.
So certainly yes for certain things, no for others. So maybe that answers the question. No.
Same for everyone. Great, guys. I'm going to have to hand it back to Bart, but it was a real pleasure exchanging views and discussion with you guys. So thanks for joining in. Thanks for giving the knowledge to the audience as well. And Bart, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you so much to the panelists one more for a wonderful, informative discussion. I really enjoyed it, and I believe all of our attendees did as well. And we're sorry we couldn't answer all of the questions that have been posted. I believe there will be a few folks that will be trying to get some answers to you guys to some of those. You can always reach us at marketing@montrium.com as well and send in any additional questions. And also, what I have up on the screen for you guys today is just a quick overview of tomorrow's sessions. So please make sure to join us tomorrow for another jam-packed day full of insights and great knowledge. We also have time for a networking break right after this. So please join us and head over to the lounge or virtual booth to chat with your peers, your colleagues, meet any new people, or simply just chill and have a good time. So again, thank you so much, everyone, and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.